You read that title right. FSR4 is working on Intel graphics cards. Specifically, I'm running it on a first generation Intel graphics card, the Intel Arc A580. This graphics card around this time last year was probably the best value 1080p gaming GPU that you could find. I was seeing it pop up on Newegg, Micro Center, Amazon for 120 US dollars. I've even seen reports of some people getting it off at Micro Center for 110. Unfortunately, Intel no longer makes this specific GPU, but it has made Intel has made immense strides in improving the first generation cards drivers, so much so that the Arc A580 now is pretty comparable to an RTX 3060 12 GB in performance, as well as an RX 6600. And I've done videos before on it in the past. They've also improved the driver overhead issue, and I am currently running that Intel Arc A580 with the Ryzen 5 5600X overclocked to 4.85 gigahertz. It's paired with 16 gigabytes of 3200 megatransfers per second of CL16 RAM in dual channel, playing it off of a 512 gigabyte NVMe SSD with a DRAM cache. And I do actually have the Arc card overclocked as well. We have a plus 25 millivolt offset, core limit, power limit. So the power limit of the card is usually at 150. I've pushed it all the way up to 180. Performance boost, we've set this to a 30% performance boost. So I'm going to show you how to install it very quickly. So just go to your internet browser and search for FSR4 int8 SDK files, and you'll find this guide on GitHub that shows you how to do this on AMD GPUs. However, we have Intel Arc, so the only thing you need is this first one, and the first step is Google Drive link. You click on that, it'll take you to this page. Just go ahead and hit download. So here it is, the SDK 2.0 plus FSR4 int8. So all you need to do is copy these files into your Cyberpunk exe directory. So for me, that's going to be in Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Cyberpunk. And you're going to go to the bin folder, x64, and you'll find your exe in this folder. So just paste it into here. It'll ask you to overwrite. Go ahead and do that. Any files that they do overwrite, first I would recommend changing it to like a .old.og in order to differentiate it. Just in case there are issues, you can revert back to the original files. So I did that with this. It's already replaced there. If you look at the FSR SDK folder, you have to copy these three files. After you do that, there's an FSR4 int8 folder in that folder as well. You need to copy this in there and overwrite as well. You need to do this in this order, because if you try to copy it before that, I've run into issues. So definitely copy these three files first and then copy this over and overwrite. The other thing I do, it is really important, especially for an Intel card, is go back to your search engine and search for XeSS SDK. You're going to find another GitHub, and on the right hand side you'll see the release here is XeSS SDK 2.1. Go ahead and click on that, and then under assets click on XeSS SDK 2.01 to download it. I already have that file, so if you go to downloads, there. So in the XeSS SDK folder, click on bin, and you'll see these four files. Go ahead and copy these files into the same folder for Cyberpunk, and you'll paste it into here. It's going to ask you to override as well, so I changed some of the files here to .old just so I can keep the original ones in case I run into an issue. That's it. And then all you got to do is launch Cyberpunk and it'll be working. Here we are in Cyberpunk 2077, the Phantom Liberty expansion as well. And we're just in this grassy area. I want to show you So we're running 1440p. No resolution scaling. So we're at native high preset, which sets the crowd density to medium. I set the field of view to 100, and I set all of these other stuff to off as a personal preference. And then in the advanced section for the actual graphical settings, it's all set to high. So as you can see, we are getting roughly 47 FPS at 1440p on an Intel Arc A580 at native resolution. You can see the hologram there is still quite flickery, but foliage is all pretty stable. You can see that the fence lines up there, the wires, they're all pretty stable. Let's take a look at some upscaling. Let's do first FSR 2.1. We're going to skip FSR 3 because FSR 3 in this game is absolute trash. 2.1 looks better. So I'm going to keep sharpening to 0.3 there and put it to performance mode. And now we're getting a stable 60 plus FPS experience. However, sure you can notice, especially with the bridge there, a lot of the fencing detail is gone. There's so much shimmering in the antennas on top of the building there. The holographic image above the travel point is also shimmering quite a lot, and the foliage is a night and day difference between native. But I mean, you're getting over 60 FPS, so that's good, I guess. But we've got other options. Now that we've swapped in that XeSS, oh, and you already saw it, there's FSR4, it's in the game for the Intel Arc A580. So, and Intel XeSS Super Resolution 2.0, the base game runs 2.1, but unfortunately, if you want to get XeSS frame generation, you need, it reverts it back to 2.0. The frame generation is definitely worth it though, but we'll touch on that later. So we'll switch this to balance. So this is going to be similar to FSR 2.1 performance. So we're upscaling from about a 1080p resolution. And as you can see, look at that. Look at the stability in the antennas, the wires, and even the foliage here. So much more stable. I mean, there's still some, yeah, there's still some sizzling and some like unstable image for sure, especially, I mean, with the hologram, you can see it there, still quite shimmery, but the stability is much improved. In fact, another thing you'll notice is, at least with Intel Arc cards, including the first generation Arc cards, they run XeSS better than the AMD and NVIDIA counterparts. On the Alchemist Intel cards, you get a higher frame rate than FSR 2.1, which is crazy because FSR 2.1 is pretty aggressive when it comes to boosting the FPS. But I would be happy to play with this, honestly. It's pretty decent looking still. However, there's a better option now for Intel. Let's do FSR4 in performance mode. High settings. Easiest thing to tell here is with the hologram above the travel point, it's completely stable. Look at the antenna above, there's more detail. Even in performance mode, you can see the lining on the fences in the back there. The foliage, completely stable now. And what we were getting before was like a roughly 44 frames per second native. Now we're at 53 in this scene, 54. So it's about a 10% boost in FPS. So you're still getting a decent boost, and the game just looks better. I mean, you're shy of 60 FPS, especially at 1440p. But let's take a look at a different scene. Let's put it back to native. All right, so in this scene, this is a much more graphically intensive scene. You can see that the signage next to the benches here, very shimmery and unstable. The holograms in the back, and the graphic signs all the way in the back there, shimmering as well as this fencing. You can see the sign post is also shimmering in parts. Those lights just straight ahead under the Bayside sign to the left, so you can see it's also shimmering a lot. We're getting about 43 FPS on average here. In this particular scene, you're going to notice that resolution scaling doesn't seem to really affect FPS much at all here. So we're getting 48 FPS here. Just let it settle. Something's happening weird with the GPU percentage. The Arc A580 is only 81% usage. Alright, something's happening weird. I'm gonna reset and get back into the game and see if that fixes it. Alright, maybe it's because we're maxing out the GPU or the CPU usage because we're running in performance mode at 1440p. So we are getting a bit of a bottleneck here due to using aggressive upscaling. But you can see, so FSR 2.1 is more shimmery, is the most shimmery out of all of them, most unstable image. And if we switch to XeSS, we'll gain some stability. But the signs and the lighting is still unstable. Let's switch it over to FSR4 performance. Okay, it's definitely applying it. Something weird is happening with the settings because now we're at up to 90% usage on the GPU, even though we're using FSR performance upscaling, and it's resolved a lot of the flickering issues. The lights are stable now. All of that is stable. All well and good. So you're getting a very slight 10% boost around roughly a 10% boost to the from the uh, native resolution. The other resolutions are quite a bit faster though. FSR 2.1 specifically gets a 25% boost in FPS, and XeSS gets a 30% boost in actual gameplay. But what's strange is these percentages change when you enable frame generation. And I think frame generation in conjunction with FSR4 is where it really shines. So let's turn that on. Okay, so we're now back in the game and we've got XeSS frame generation enabled. The reason why I prefer using XeSS FrameGen over FSR3 FrameGen in this game is that FSR3 FrameGen, while gives a very respectable amount of FPS, it adds a lot of ghosting issues still, unfortunately. XeSS frame generation does actually use a bit of AI for their generated frames, providing a better experience overall. Don't mind the 1% and 0.1% lows now because MSI Afterburner, even with the latest update with it, still does not report the 1% and 0.1% values for XeSS FrameGen correctly. But it's so much more smoother now. At 1440p resolution, high settings, we're getting around 80 FPS. And like I said, image is stable. Look at that. That's clean. The lighting from on that side is also clean. The game just looks incredible. And let's say if we were to drop it to XeSS balanced, we're going to get a higher FPS count here. So XeSS upscaling and FSR 2.1 are going to get you a little bit more FPS, but in my opinion, it is worth the slight loss in FPS in order to get a more stable image. Let's kick it up a notch and do low ray tracing, which is just the local shadows, which changes the visual look of the game quite a bit. Yeah. And we're still getting over 60 FPS with ray tracing and FSR4. So there you have it. An Intel Arc A580 can run 1440p low ray tracing, high preset with 60 plus FPS, and it feels quite smooth. You know what? Let's take it a step further. Let's drop it down to medium preset. FSR4 performance. We'll keep the local shadows on. Turn off all of this. Now we're at the medium preset. And now we're getting 70 FPS. You still do get some visual kind of artifacting with some objects as you move, but overall, visually it's retaining a lot more of the detail and a lot more of that stability while in motion. Of course, you can do this at 1080p as well. Granted, I prefer upscaling when you're using higher resolutions just because you have more data to work with. But let's say if we did want to do that, let's drop to 1080p. So here we are at 1080p now, running in balanced mode. FSR4 balanced mode with XeSS frame generation. Strangely enough, it doesn't appear to really boost FPS all that much. So you're better off just going with 1440p. Oh no, it does boost it because yeah. I think 1440p was around like 60, just above 65. So you are getting a decent boost in performance if you wanted to play 1080p with some ray tracing. Another thing I would recommend, lastly, in order to get the most reduced latency for using XeSS FrameGen is to put a frame rate limit. In the video here, we have a low latency frame rate target. Set that to whatever you're averaging in your gameplays, and you're going to have a way smoother and more responsive time with Cyberpunk. As you can see, though, the percentage usage on the GPU has drastically dropped here. The Ryzen 5 5600 is quite high as well. Keep in mind that running upscaling is a CPU intensive task. It reduces load on your GPU. No, and we are running the medium settings as well. Yeah, still doing that weird thing with the other upscalers. It's like not utilizing. I don't know, something weird's happening. Let's go to. Let's shut it off altogether. So native resolution still getting around 69, 71 FPS with ray tracing. That's pretty good. Let's put on FSR4 and fix the visuals, and we have. I'm not exactly sure what is happening with the game. So there's still some bugs or kinks, but it definitely, when it works well. Maybe it just needs time to like render or something. Oh, it's just jumped up to 95. Maybe it just needs time. Shaders are loading in or something. I'll go over some quick numbers. While the in-game benchmark is really good at providing the exact same scene, it is not realistic when it comes to its FPS values, at least from what I'm finding. When I did the test in the benchmark, the in-game built-in benchmark, I was getting like 30% increases with FSR and XeSS, which is not real world values. So I have my own personal 7 to 8 minute run that includes a bar fight, a parking lot fight, driving around and walking around in some populated areas. And I ran that in multiple configuration settings. So in native 1440p high preset, no ray tracing or frame generation, we got an average of 45 FPS. FSR 2.1 in performance mode got us an 11% increase at 50 FPS. XeSS 2.0 balance took the winner here at 54 FPS, which is a 20% increase from native. And FSR4 performance definitely takes a pretty significant hit here, only a 4% increase in the FPS when compared to native. So that is a very paltry result for such an aggressive upscaler on FSR4 performance compared to native 1440p. However, you would think that this percentage would scale, with all settings being equal, would scale the same with frame generation. And it does not actually. Pretty interesting. So let's take a look. So all we've done here is activate XeSS frame generation, and we're getting much different results from before. So with FSR 2.1 in performance mode, we're getting 91 FPS as opposed to the 77 native, which is an 18% increase from the native. XeSS 2.0 balanced gives us a 16% boost in FPS from the native. And FSR performance gives us a 12% boost. So that is pretty significant. And that is all settings the exact same, just enabled frame generation. It seems that the upscaling technology works differently with the frame generation to provide a much better result than just the upscaler alone by itself. The final graph we're going to look at today is 1440p high preset low RT, so that's just the local shadows, with XeSS frame generation. So with base native, we get 66 FPS. FSR 2.1 in performance mode yields us 83 FPS, which is a 26% increase compared to native. XeSS 2.0 balanced gives us a 27% increase, and FSR4 performance gives us a 17% increase. So once again, another situation where another change in the settings, well, enabling ray tracing, does work weirdly with XeSS frame generation and the upscaling methods. So this is a pretty significant increase to the FPS and definitely a playable experience at 1440p with low ray tracing on an Intel Arc A580. I'm curious about you guys. Who is running FSR4 and what cards are you running it on? I have a gaming laptop with a 1660 Ti in it, and supposedly FSR4 also works on that. So I'm going to test that out at some point. If you guys are interested in seeing that, let me know. Um, and I'll post the results for that as well. Who would have thought that even though Intel has made great strides with their drivers, what's breathing new life into the first generation of Intel cards is AMD. Pretty awesome stuff. So if you have an Alchemist card, highly recommend checking out or trying to run FSR4 in your games because I think it's 100% worth it, especially if you're doing it at higher resolutions. That's it for now, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.